Hunter Rhodes's voice was a blade of ice in the suffocating silence of his office. "The board wants you gone, Kaylee. Publicly fired. An example." He leaned back in his leather throne, a predator watching his cornered prey. "But I have another option for you." He slid a thick document across the vast expanse of his mahogany desk. It wasn't a severance package. It was a contract. A marriage contract. His stormy gray eyes pinned her to the spot, stripping away the last of her dignity. "You will marry me, act as my devoted wife for 1 year, and in return, you keep your job, and I secure my inheritance." The world tilted, the city lights outside his panoramic window blurring into a dizzying smear. She was trapped, and the only escape he offered was a gilded cage, with him holding the only key. Could she trade her freedom for her future, her heart for her career? Could she survive a year shackled to a man she despised, a man whose touch felt like both a punishment and a forbidden promise? Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The words echoed in the sterile, opulent space of Hunter Rhodes's office, each one a hammer blow against the fragile shield of Kaylee Adams's composure. A reputational risk. Gross negligence. Termination. The phrases, delivered by the company's stone-faced head of HR, were clinical, detached, and utterly devastating. The scandal wasn't even her fault, a catastrophic error made by a junior team member under her supervision. But in the cutthroat world of Rhodes Corporation, the captain always went down with the ship. And her ship was sinking fast. Her career, the one she had painstakingly built over 8 years of sleepless nights, sacrificed weekends, and relentless ambition, was about to be obliterated. She would be blacklisted, a pariah in the industry, all because of a single colossal mistake that wasn't hers. As the HR director and the company lawyer droned on, Kaylee's gaze drifted to the man who had remained silent throughout the execution. Hunter Rhodes, CEO, her boss, and the architect of her professional life and now, its potential destroyer. He was an intimidating figure, exuding an aura of power and control that was as much a part of him as his impeccably tailored suits and the glacial chill in his gray eyes. He watched her, not with pity, but with a detached, analytical curiosity, as if she were a complex problem he was moments away from solving. When the others had finally delivered their verdict and departed, leaving a suffocating silence in their wake, he spoke. "They're right, you know," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. "The board is baying for blood. This mistake cost us the Henderson account. Millions. Someone has to pay the price." Kaylee lifted her chin, a spark of defiance cutting through her despair. "It wasn't my mistake, Hunter. I have the logs, the emails. It doesn't matter," he cut her off, his tone final. "You were the project lead. The failure is yours. That's how this world works." He rose from his chair and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to her. The city sprawled beneath them, a glittering tapestry of lights, a world that had once felt full of promise but now seemed to mock her. "My father is using this as leverage," he said, his voice tight with a frustration that surprised her. "He's always disapproved of my leadership style. This is the perfect excuse for him to invoke the succession clause in the company charter." Kaylee frowned, confused. "The succession clause?" He turned, his expression unreadable. "A ridiculous, archaic stipulation my grandfather put in place. To inherit controlling shares on my 35th birthday, I must be, and I quote, stably married, demonstrating a commitment to family values." He said the last words with a sneer. "My birthday is in 3 months. My father knows I have no intention of getting married. He plans to use my instability, compounded by this professional scandal, to challenge my position and install his own puppet on the Amore board." The pieces of a puzzle she didn't even know existed began to click into place. This was about more than just a lost account. It was a power struggle within the Rhodes dynasty, but she couldn't see how it involved her. "I'm sorry to hear that, Hunter, but what does this have to do with me?" He walked back to his desk, his movements fluid and deliberate. He didn't sit. He perched on the edge, looming over her, a position of absolute dominance. "You're in a bind, Kaylee. I'm in a bind. Perhaps our respective problems can cancel each other out." A cold dread began to creep up her spine. "What are you proposing?" He slid a thick leather-bound folder across the desk. It landed with a soft, definitive thud. "I am proposing a solution. A merger of sorts." His lips curved into a smile that held no warmth, only cynical amusement. "Marry me." The air left Kaylee's lungs in a single, silent gasp. She stared at him, certain she had misheard. The idea was so preposterous, so utterly insane, that she almost laughed. But the look in his eyes was deadly serious. "You can't be serious." "I am never not serious when it comes to my company," he replied smoothly. "It's a simple business proposition. You need to save your career. I need a wife to secure my inheritance and solidify my control over this company. We enter into a contractual marriage for a period of 1 year. You will play the part of the loving, supportive Mrs. Rhodes. In return, the scandal disappears. Your job is secure. In fact, you'll be promoted. And at the end of the year, we divorce quietly. And you walk away with a severance package that will ensure you never have to work another day in your life if you so choose." She was speechless, her mind reeling. He spoke of marriage as if it were a corporate acquisition, a strategic alliance devoid of any emotion. He was offering her a golden parachute, but the price was her life, her integrity. "You want to buy a wife. I want to solve a problem," he corrected. "And you, Kaylee, are the perfect candidate. You're intelligent, beautiful, and you understand my world. You know what's at stake. There will be no messy emotions, no romantic delusions. It's a clean transaction." He gestured to the folder. "The contract is all there, ironclad, in outlines everything. Public appearances, living arrangements, a strict no fraternization clause, everything." She stared at the folder, at the elegant embossed logo of the most prestigious law firm in the city. Inside that folder was a lifeline and a prison sentence. She thought of her mother, whose medical bills were a constant crushing weight. She thought of the years of sacrifice, the dream of reaching the top, now turning to ash. Hunter was offering her a way out, a devil's bargain. She could say no, walk away with her pride intact, and face financial ruin and professional exile. Or she could say yes, and sell her soul for security. "Why me?" she whispered, the question feeling small and insignificant in the face of his grand, audacious scheme. His gaze softened for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something almost human in their depths. "Because, despite this mess, you are the best at what you do. And, because I know you're a survivor, you'll do what's necessary." He stood up, straightening his tie. "You have 24 hours to decide, Kaylee. The offer expires tomorrow at noon. Read the contract, have your lawyer look at it. But know this, it's the only offer you're going to get." The wedding was an exercise in elegant hypocrisy. It took place not in a grand church, but in the sterile, art-filled living room of Hunter's penthouse, the city skyline serving as a silent, unblinking witness. The guest list was ruthlessly small. Hunter's father, Julian Rhodes, sat stone-faced in a designer chair, his eyes missing nothing, his disapproval a palpable force field. Beside him, his sister, Elena, watched Kaylee with a disconcerting mix of pity and curiosity. And then there was Clarissa Vance, a board member, and a woman who had long made her interest in Hunter clear, perched like a vulture in couture, a predatory smile playing on her lips as she watched the ceremony unfold. Her presence felt like a deliberate move by Hunter, a challenge thrown down. Kaylee wore a simple cream-colored sheath dress that Hunter's personal shopper had selected. It was chic, understated, and felt like a costume. As she stood beside Hunter, listening to the officiant speak of love, honor, and cherish, the words felt like a cruel mockery. She could feel Hunter's body heat next to hers, a constant, unnerving presence. When he took her hand to slide a heavy, platinum band onto her finger, his touch was firm, possessive. It sent a tremor through her that had nothing to do with bridal nerves and everything to do with the man she was legally binding herself to. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant declared. For a split second, the world seemed to stop. This was it. The point of no return. Kaylee's breath hitched. Hunter turned to her, his stormy gray eyes searching hers. She saw a flicker of something unreadable in their depths, not warmth, not affection, but perhaps a shared understanding of the sheer audacity of what they were doing. He lowered his head, and his lips met hers. It was not the chaste, performative peck she had expected. It was a kiss that was both a promise and a threat. It was firm, deliberate, and lingered a second too long. His lips were surprisingly soft, moving against hers with an expert confidence that stole the air from her lungs. In that brief, shocking moment, in front of his family and his enemy, he wasn't her boss or her business partner. He was her husband, and the kiss branded her as his, a public declaration of ownership that left her dizzy and trembling. When he pulled away, his eyes were dark, intense. He had just shattered one of their unspoken rules, and they both knew it. The reception was a tense, stilted affair. Julian Rhodes approached her, his gaze as sharp as shattered glass. "So, you're the woman who finally tamed my son," he said, his voice a low growl. It wasn't a compliment. "Hunter is a wonderful man, Mr. Rhodes," Kaylee managed, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "He is a Rhodes," Julian corrected her. "That means he is driven, ruthless, and expects to get what he wants. I hope, for your sake, you know what you've gotten yourself into." Later, Clarissa cornered her by the champagne fountain. "I have to hand it to you, darling," she purred, her eyes raking over Kaylee's dress. "I never saw you as the gold-digging type, but you certainly aimed for the top. Tell me, what's it like to be the star of a fairy tale? Or is it more of a cautionary tale?" Before Kaylee could form a reply, Hunter was at her side, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. "Clarissa," he said, his voice dangerously soft, "I'd appreciate it if you didn't harass my wife." The word wife hung in the air, a shield and a weapon. Clarissa's smile faltered, and with a final, venomous glare, she retreated. "Thank you," Kaylee murmured, surprised by the gesture. "Don't thank me," Hunter said, his voice low and for her ears only. "Our arrangement has to be believable. That means we present a united front at all times." His hand didn't leave her back, its warmth seeping through the thin fabric of her dress, a constant reminder of their charade. Living with Hunter was like living in a gilded cage. His penthouse was a masterpiece of modern architecture, a palace of glass and steel suspended high above the city. It was beautiful, luxurious, and profoundly lonely. They were two strangers sharing a space, their lives governed by the clauses of their contract. They had separate bedrooms, separate bathrooms, and a carefully orchestrated routine designed to minimize contact. Yet the proximity was unavoidable. She'd catch his scent, a clean, masculine fragrance of sandalwood, and something uniquely him lingering in the hallway after he left for his morning run. She'd see him in the kitchen late at night, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up, a glass of whiskey in his hand as he stared out at the city lights, the weight of his empire etched on his face. In these unguarded moments, she saw glimpses of a man different from the ruthless CEO. She saw a flicker of weariness, a hint of solitude that mirrored her own. One evening, she found him in his home office, surrounded by stacks of paperwork, a deep frown creasing his brow. "Everything okay?" she asked, hovering by the doorway. He looked up, surprised to see her. "Just another fire to put out," he said, rubbing his temples. "A supply chain issue in the Asian market." He looked genuinely exhausted. On impulse, she walked to the wet bar in the corner, poured him a fresh glass of whiskey, and set it on his desk. He stared at the glass, then up at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Thank you, Kaylee." The words were simple, but they felt different from his earlier performative defense of her. They felt real. "You looked like you needed it," she said, her voice softer than she intended. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Stay, please." She hesitated, then took a seat in the chair opposite his desk. They sat in a comfortable silence for a few minutes, the only sound the faint clinking of ice in his glass. "My father never thought I could run this company," he said suddenly, his gaze distant. "He always saw me as reckless, impulsive. He built this empire from the ground up. He can't let go. He thinks this marriage is just another one of my reckless schemes, is it?" Kaylee asked quietly. He met her gaze, his eyes intense. "It's a calculated risk, but it's not just about the company, Kaylee. It's about proving him wrong. It's about legacy." In that moment, she understood him a little better. She saw the little boy still trying to earn his father's approval, hidden beneath the layers of arrogance and power. It was a vulnerability she hadn't expected, and it stirred something in her, a dangerous empathy that had no place in their business arrangement. The first major test of their fake marriage came in the form of the annual Rhodes Corporation Charity Gala, the most important social event of the year. It was a night for the city's elite to see and be seen, and this year, all eyes would be on the new Mrs. Hunter Rhodes. Kaylee wore a stunning sapphire gown that Hunter had insisted on buying for her. It clung to her curves in all the right places, and for the first time, she felt not like an imposter, but like a woman who belonged in this glittering world. As she descended the grand staircase of the penthouse to meet Hunter, she saw him stop mid-sentence with his assistant, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly as he took her in. "You look," he started, then cleared his throat, as if catching himself. "Appropriate." Despite the lukewarm compliment, Kaylee felt a flush of pleasure. At the gala, he was the perfect, attentive husband. His hand was a constant, warm presence on her back, guiding her through the throng of powerful people. He introduced her with pride, his voice a low murmur in her ear as he gave her brief, insightful details about each person they met. She played her part, smiling graciously, engaging in witty banter, and holding his arm as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They were a convincing team. So convincing, in fact, that Clarissa Vance looked ready to combust. She cornered Kaylee near the terrace, her smile as sharp as a shard of glass. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Playing Cinderella. But don't forget, the clock will strike midnight, and you'll be back among the cinders." This time, Kaylee didn't need Hunter to rescue her. She met Clarissa's venomous gaze with a cool smile of her own. "I think you're mixing up your fairy tales, Clarissa. I'm not Cinderella. And this," she said, gesturing to the opulent ballroom, to Hunter, who was now watching them from across the room with a thunderous expression, "is my castle." As she walked away, leaving Clarissa fuming, she felt a heady rush of power. But her victory was short-lived. Later that evening, during the charity auction, Hunter made a shockingly high bid on a diamond necklace. When the auctioneer asked who the lucky recipient was, Hunter turned, his gaze locking with Kaylee's from across the room, and smiled. "For my beautiful wife." The room erupted in applause. Kaylee's heart hammered against her ribs. It was a performance, a grand, public gesture to solidify their image as a devoted couple. But as the necklace was brought to their table, and Hunter fastened the cold, heavy diamonds around her neck, his fingers brushing against her skin, it felt like something more. It felt like he was marking his territory, binding her to him with chains of diamonds and public expectation. The line between the charade and reality was beginning to blur, and the thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The jealousy, when it came, was a raw, unexpected punch to the gut. It happened a few weeks after the gala. Kaylee was working late, trying to untangle a complex merger deal, when she saw Hunter leave his office with Clarissa. They were laughing, their heads close together. Clarissa's hand was on his arm, a casual, intimate gesture that sent a white-hot spike of rage through Kaylee. She knew it was absurd. Her marriage was a sham. Hunter was free to do as he pleased. The contract had a no-fraternization clause, but it only applied to them. It said nothing about him seeing other women, but logic was no match for the visceral, possessive anger that consumed her. She watched them get into the elevator together, a sick feeling churning in her stomach. She couldn't focus on work. She went home, pacing the silent penthouse like a caged animal. He didn't come home until after 2 a.m. She was waiting for him in the living room, wrapped in a silk robe, the lights dimmed. He stopped short when he saw her. "Kaylee? What are you doing up? Where were you?" The question was out before she could stop it, sharp and accusatory. A flicker of surprise, then amusement, crossed his face. "I was in a business meeting." "A business meeting that ends at 2 in the morning? With Clarissa Vance hanging off your arm?" He raised an eyebrow, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his lips. He walked towards her, unbuttoning his cuffs. "Are you jealous, Mrs. Rhodes?" "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped, turning away, her cheeks burning. "I was just concerned, for the sake of our arrangement. It wouldn't do for you to be seen in a compromising position." He cornered her against the window, placing his hands on the glass on either side of her head, trapping her. The city lights twinkled behind him, creating a halo around his dark form. "Is that all it is, Kaylee? The arrangement?" His voice was a low, seductive whisper. His face was inches from hers, his gaze intense, searching. She could smell the faint scent of whiskey on his breath, mixed with his own intoxicating scent. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. The no-fraternization clause, the contract, the carefully constructed walls between them, they all seemed to be dissolving in the heat of his gaze. She wanted to push in the way, to remind him of the rules. But she also wanted to lean in, to close the infinitesimal distance between them, to feel his lips on hers again, not for an audience, but for real. "Hunter, don't," she breathed, her voice trembling. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't," he murmured, his eyes dropping to her lips. The reason was their contract. The reason was her pride. The reason was the terrifying, undeniable fact that she was falling for her fake husband, but she couldn't voice any of them. Before she could answer, his lips captured hers. It was nothing like their wedding kiss. This was not a performance. It was raw, hungry, and desperate. It was a kiss full of all the unspoken tension that had been simmering between them for weeks. It was a violation of every rule they had set, and yet it felt like the most honest thing they had ever done. She melted against him, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, a fiery explosion of pent-up desire and forbidden feelings. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, their faces flushed. The reality of what they had just done crashed down on them. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back. "Kaylee," he whispered, his voice hoarse, his forehead resting against hers. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice barely audible. "I know," he agreed, but he didn't move away. Neither did she. They stood there, wrapped in the silence of the night, the city lights bearing witness to the moment their carefully crafted business arrangement had irrevocably shattered. The contract was broken, and in its place was something far more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. The aftermath was a minefield of awkward silences and stolen glances. They tried to pretend it hadn't happened, to retreat back to the safety of their contractual roles, but the memory of the kiss lingered between them, a palpable entity in every room they shared. The carefully drawn lines had been washed away, leaving them adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The final confrontation came from the one person they had sought to deceive the most, Julian Rhodes. He summoned Kaylee to his office, a cavernous, wood-paneled room that smelled of old money and intimidation. Hunter was conveniently out of the country, a trip Julian had almost certainly arranged. "He's not here to protect you now," Julian said, dispensing with any pretense of civility. He slid a thin file across his desk. It was a private investigator's report, filled with grainy photos of Kaylee entering her old, modest apartment building, of Hunter and Clarissa leaving a restaurant, of the separate wings they occupied in the penthouse. "Did you really think I was that foolish? That I wouldn't look into the background of the woman who miraculously captured my son's heart just months before the succession deadline?" Kaylee's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about. Hunter and I are in love." Julian laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Love? You wouldn't know the meaning of the word. This is a transaction, a pathetic, transparent scheme to secure his inheritance, and I will not allow it. I'm calling an emergency board meeting. I will expose this sham, and I will see to it that you are not only fired, but that Hunter is removed as CEO for gross misconduct and fraud." Panic seized her. This was it. The end of the line. Not only would she lose her job, but she would be responsible for destroying the man she had, against all odds, come to care for. But then, a strange sense of calm washed over her. She had been living a lie for so long, perhaps the truth was the only weapon she had left. "You're right," she said, her voice clear and steady. "It started as a contract." Julian leaned back, a triumphant smirk on his face. "I knew it. But it's not a contract anymore," she continued, meeting his cold gaze without flinching. "You can call your board meeting. You can show them your photos and your reports. But you know what they'll see? They'll see a man who is willing to do whatever it takes to protect what's his. They'll see a woman who has stood by him. You think you know your son, but you don't. You see ruthlessness. I see determination. You see arrogance. I see a man who is terrified of not living up to the shadow of his father. You can try to destroy him, but you'll fail, because he's not alone. Anymore." She stood up, her hands trembling but her resolve firm. As she turned to leave, the door to the office burst open. It was Hunter. His hair was disheveled, his tie askew, and his face was a mask of fury. "I got on the first flight back," he said, his eyes finding Kaylee's. "Elena called me. She told me what he was planning." He turned his furious gaze on his father. "Leave her alone. Or what? You'll disown me?" Julian scoffed. "You need me, boy." "No," Hunter said, walking to Kaylee's side and taking her hand, his fingers lacing with hers. "I don't. I have everything I need right here." He looked at Kaylee, and in his eyes she saw no artifice, no calculation, only a raw, unguarded emotion that made her heart ache. "The contract is void. I'll face the board, I'll face the consequences, but I won't let you use her to get to me." In that moment, standing beside him, their hands clasped together as a united front against the man who sought to tear them apart, Kaylee knew the truth. The marriage may have started as a way to save her job, but it had become the very thing that had saved her. She had been so afraid of being trapped, but she had never felt more free. Hunter faced the board, with Kaylee by his side. He didn't make excuses. He told them the whole truth, about the succession clause, the initial contract, and how the lie had somehow, miraculously, become the truth. He told them he was in love with his wife, and that if they couldn't accept that, if they couldn't accept him, then he would walk away from it all. It was the biggest gamble of his life. But as he spoke, Kaylee saw the respect in the eyes of the board members. They didn't see a fraud. They saw a leader. A man who was willing to risk everything for what he believed in. In the end, Julian's power play crumbled. His motion to remove Hunter was defeated. That night, back in the penthouse, the silence was different. It wasn't tense or awkward. It was peaceful. They stood on the balcony, the city lights spread out before them like a blanket of scattered diamonds. "You didn't have to do that," Kaylee said softly. "Risk everything for me." Hunter turned to her, his hands finding her waist, pulling her close. "It was never for you, Kaylee," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It was for us." He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "I was so focused on winning, on beating my father, that I almost lost the most important thing in my life." He leaned in, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was a promise, a vow far more real than the one they had made in front of the officiant. "I love you, Kaylee Rhodes," not as a clause in a contract, but for real. Tears welled in her eyes as she smiled. "I love you too." The contract had been a prison, but it had led her to a freedom she had never imagined. She had wed her boss to save her job, but in doing so, she had found a love she could no longer, and never wanted to, escape. The gilded cage had become a home.